Today you're going to be doing a case study examining mercury in fish. It's a little bit more of what you've been doing with bioaccumulation and biomagnification throughout a food chain. So here are some actual examples of different types of fish and exactly how much mercury that they contain. On the left is mercury levels for fish that you can catch, clean, and eat. And then on the right is the fish that we actually buy at Wegmans or Harris Teeter. Notice down here some of the tastier fish, tuna, swordfish, shark steaks, are actually very high in mercury. If you're looking for fish that you can purchase that are lower in mercury content, go with salmon or go with different types of shellfish. So how exactly does mercury get into the atmosphere and in turn get into the water system? So really, coal-burning power plants are the most common source of mercury pollution. Basically, coal contains natural mercury, and when it's burned off, that stuff gets released into the air. So that gets released into the air. The mercury then gets deposited onto land and into water. Bacteria pick it all up, and what is left over is this methyl mercury. So this methyl mercury actually does get into the food web, and it's really, really toxic. And again, just like we were talking about with our little M&M example, you have phytoplankton sucking up that methyl mercury. Phytoplankton is eaten by zooplankton as well as snails, as well as plant-eating fish. And then those fish are in turn eaten by either smaller fish or then eventually up to the top level consumer or the upper level consumer in the largemouth bass. So again, you have this mercury being burned off into the atmosphere, gets deposited on land and into water, into bacteria. Bacteria then convert it into methyl mercury, which then goes into phytoplankton and moves itself up the food chain. So what you're going to see in your case study is there were actually some investigations done. There were some experiments done to investigate mercury in fish, mercury in sediment, mercury in water in streams across the U.S. Over about a 7-year period. So their methods were they analyzed 291 different fish from streams nationwide. They targeted largemouth bass, but then they also targeted 34 other species of fish. The fish were caught using different methods. The fish fillet was then analyzed for mercury. They tested sediment. Each sediment sample was tested for mercury, and they also tested the water. So here were mercury concentrations found in the fish tissues of the commonly sampled fish species. These are error bars. It's basically one standard deviation away from the mean. The United States EPA criteria for human health is right here at 0.3 micrograms per gram. And here is a concern level, all right, for this word piscivorous means mammals that eat fish. So every single fish tested from nearly 300 water streams in the U.S. was found to contain mercury. And as you go higher and higher on the food chain, you're going to find more mercury. So you'll see that bioaccumulation is taking place, just like we saw with our osprey in our M&M lab. So basically, in order to study further mercury content in a food web, you would want to collect fish, zooplankton, crustaceans, all kinds of life from the waters to be able to measure the methylmercury levels. And then here is another way that we can kind of see that bioaccumulation and how it's magnified as you go up the food chain. So here we have zooplankton, which is at the base of our food chain, and we're going to continue to go up. These organisms eat phytoplankton and zooplankton. These organisms eat the one from underneath. As you can see, you look at this northern pike minnow, which eats other fish, its methylmercury contents are off the charts. So again, here is that food web. if we have small amounts down here with the algae, we see that it's only going to wind up growing until we get up to this pike minnow. And here is another diagram of that where we see smaller amounts of mercury lower in the food chain, and that amount of mercury continues to grow as we go up. So again, we were talking about bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Biomagnification is an increase in concentration of a pollutant from one link in the food chain to another. So as we can see, small amounts of mercury here at the bottom where these zooplankton and phytoplankton are, and it continues to grow, 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 grow. If we are eating fish that have high levels of mercury, we in turn are going to have high levels of mercury inside our bodies. So what you guys are going to wind up doing is you are going to go through this case study. It pretty much details what I just went over. I wanted to explain a little bit. There are some places for you to read in here where it talks about the EPA and the FDA advice for women who might become pregnant and the fish choices that they should probably make while they're pregnant. There are some questions to answer here down at the bottom of page 2. Then you go into part 3 where it talks about how does mercury exactly get into fish. Here are the details of that report that I was talking about in the presentation. And then you have 7 questions here on the bottom of page 5 that you need to answer as well. And then as we get into page 6 and page 7, it goes further into the methylmercury concentrations in these fish based on the results of that study. And then finally, you have questions at the bottom of page 6 that I'd like you to answer. And I would like you to do part 2 on the final activity. Find 2 other examples of compounds that biomagnify. Explain how each compound and/or toxin enters the biosphere and what impacts it has on living organisms in general and humans in particular. So I'd like you to go ahead and begin working on that. And if you have any questions, I'm sure you guys could ask each other or ask the sub who's here. Thanks.